All right, I see folks starting to join us. Welcome. We're a little early, so we'll just give it a couple more minutes to get started. All right, welcome everyone. I see people are beginning to join us. We're right at noon, so I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes to allow folks to join us. Okay, I see a good group of folks joining. I'm going to give it just one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone. All right, it is 12:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia Meet the Dole Caregiver Fellows event. My name is Laurel Haxton, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We're thrilled to see you on the call this afternoon and are excited to spend the next hour with you discussing how we can better support Virginia's more than 263,000 hidden heroes, the military and veteran caregivers, taking care of our ill, injured, and wounded veterans across the state. I'd first like to thank Governor Glenn Youngkin and his team for bringing this important effort to light and declaring August as Hidden Heroes Month in Virginia. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Daniel Gabe and the entire team at the Virginia Department of Veteran Services for their steadfast support and partnership in this effort. Without these leaders, this special month and newly formed partnership would not have been possible. At the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, we strive to support military and veteran caregivers, our hidden heroes, through innovative programming, peer-to-peer support, and strategic partnerships like the one that we are highlighting today. Founded in 2012 by Senator Elizabeth Dole after she spent 11 months with her husband, the late Senator Bob Dole, at Walter Reed Hospital. It was there that she met countless spouses, parents, children, and other loved ones taking care of their veterans with little to no support. Today, a decade later, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation is the leading organization supporting the nation's 5.5 million military and veteran caregivers. Whether you are a caregiver, community partner, or veteran, we encourage you to go to hiddenheroes.org to discover the resources available through the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, from no-cost respite relief to emergency financial assistance and advocacy on important programs such as the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers. The Elizabeth Dole Foundation is proud to be a leading voice for caregivers. However, we know that we cannot do this work alone. Over the next hour, we'll hear from the Virginia Department of Veteran Services on the tailored resources they are providing to caregivers across the state. Then, we'll hear from 3 Elizabeth Dole Caregiver Fellows who will share their caregiving journeys and share their vision for an inclusive Virginia, working together to recognize and support the state's military and veteran caregivers. We hope that through this call, you'll develop a deeper understanding of the needs of Virginia's hidden heroes and how you can be a part of this effort. We invite you to please introduce yourself in the chat box. And if you have any questions throughout the presentations, please drop those into the chat as well, and we'll discuss them at the end of the call. Lastly, this call will be recorded, and the resources mentioned will be sent out to participants through email. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Kayla LaFond, Military Spouse Liaison with the Virginia Department of Veteran Services. Kayla?
Thank you so much, Laurel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad we're here and having this collaboration with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. For us as an agency at the Virginia Department of Veterans Services, it's important to us to find ways to advocate for all military affiliated Virginians and provide the services and resources they are eligible for in order to make Virginia the state of choice to stay, work, and thrive. Within our agency, we have 7 service lines that offer different services and resources that are listed below. I wanted to highlight a program in 2 service lines that may be able to provide assistance as a caregiver. First is our Virginia Military Survivor Independence Education Program, also known as VMESDEP, that is part of our education service line. This is a state initiative for eligible military spouses and children to receive up to 8 semesters of free tuition to a Virginia public college or university. There are some specific eligibility requirements to include a Virginia residency, so I highly recommend taking a look to see if you or the veteran's children may be eligible. Our benefits team helps veterans and their families access their federal benefits through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and also state-specific benefits they may be eligible for based on the disability claim through the VA. We have 34 benefits offices throughout the Commonwealth and are available to meet with clients in person for assistance. Lastly is our Virginia Veterans and Family Support Program that has been doing amazing work for our caregiver community. And with that said, I would like to introduce my colleague, Marcus Brooks, to speak more about VVFS and how they are supporting our military and veteran caregivers. Marcus?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Brooks. I'm the Assistant Regional Manager with the Virginia Veteran and Family Support in the East Region. So the Virginia Veteran and Family Support, we are formally known as the Wounded Warrior Program that was started in 2008 to meet the growing needs of the Virginia veterans. And we had a name change in 2015 to the Virginia Veteran and Family Support. So what our mission is, we provide resource referrals, care coordination, supportive service to Virginia veterans, National Guard members, Armed Forces Reserve, caregivers, and family members. So I know we have a lot of caregivers on the call today. So what we have tried to do with the Virginia Veteran and Family Support, in an effort to enhance what we do, we created a work group to identify the needs of our caregivers and tailor resources toward those caregivers. And we do this through a needs assessment that is provided, that is taken by a resource specialist, and they develop a service plan, and they connect the individual to appropriate resources, and they offer a care coordination, and they monitor that case to ensure that a successful resolution happens. An example of some of the resources that we use would be the National Alliance for Mental Health, family-to-family groups, peer support, agency on aging, coaching resources, mission healthy relationship workshops. So basically what we do as a resource specialist with the Virginia Veteran and Family Support, we work as a navigator for our caregivers, where we help them navigate the different resources that we find in the community. For instance, if a caregiver may have trouble navigating the VA system, our resource specialist will work with that caregiver to help them work their way through these different resources. And as Kayla mentioned, we have offices throughout Virginia, and we will be putting our website in the chat so you can meet with the resource specialist in your region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for sharing about the great resources that you have at the Virginia Department of Veterans Services. My name is Betsy Eves. I am Elizabeth Dole Foundation Caregiver Fellow, and I'm excited to announce our next speaker, Miss Deb Elliott. Take it away, Deb.
Hi, everybody. Like Betsy mentioned, my name is Deborah Elliott, or Deb Elliott, and I am the 2019 Dole Caregiver Fellow for Virginia. I give care to my husband, who is now a medically retired Marine, and how I became a military caregiver, maybe a little bit different than some of the other caregivers out there, as my husband was not injured due to his services overseas, but he was actually ill. He became ill during a deployment in 2011. And he was able to finish out that deployment, but when he came home, he was very ill. and his health continued to just go downhill and got worse and worse. And we went to a bunch of different doctors and tried to figure it out, and no one seemed to know what was wrong with him. And it wasn't until many months later that we went into an emergency room, that he was admitted into a hospital. He was given a diagnosis, and that's kind of when I realized that I was going to be a caregiver. I remember the moment distinctly when I realized this, and I had just graduated college, and I was sitting in his hospital room with a not even 1 week old baby, my son, and my husband was in the hospital bed, and he was being fed intravenously, and he was doing like a total digestive rest, and we were waiting for him to have intestinal surgery. And that's when the doctors came in, and they explained to me that this was going to be a severe lifelong disease, and that it was 100% guarantee that we would eventually see a complications and reemergence at the surgery site. And that was just if the main problem stayed within that localized area. So I was like, oh, this is getting real here. So I didn't really know the term caregiver, but I knew that my husband's illness was not something that was going to go away, and even after surgery, and that this was going to be a lifelong battle for us. And I just instinctively knew right then that he was going to be needing a lot of care moving forward, and I was going to be providing most, if not all, of that care. And that's been mostly true over the years. Becoming a caregiver is truly a life-changing event, and its effects are seen and felt both emotionally and physically. So I've been a caregiver now going on 11 years. And what I've learned in that time is that caregiving is stressful and challenging work. And it is work, and it takes a toll on you. And it's really easy to lose yourself along the way. And it's within that void of loss of self that things like isolation and depression and loneliness seeps in. And it's almost unavoidable because we put so much time and effort into caring for the veteran that the caregiver health and well-being gets put on the back burner. The problem with the back burner is that the caregiver gets lost and forgotten and neglected, which is not a formula for a happy, healthy caregiver. And I don't believe that there's a caregiver out there that hasn't felt overwhelmed and alone and defeated at multiple times during their journey. On the other side of that, I've also learned from being a caregiver that in order to get yourself off that back burner and to really thrive, is that you have to find a balance between caregiving for another person and caring for yourself. And for that to happen, caregivers need a reliable support network, and they really need easy access to a variety of necessary tools and resources. So personally, for me, the tools and resources that have helped me get off that back burner, and some of them are really basic things, access to medical care, access to therapy, getting out of myself and volunteering, fellowship programs, access to childcare, access to other caregivers. That is very important. Access to educational opportunities and respite options. So this was like the winning combination for me to kind of help bring me back to life. But the winning combination is likely to be very different for other caregivers, as we have different needs and we're in different parts of our journey. What I've learned from being an EDF fellow is that I am not at all alone in my caregiving struggles. And there are so many other caregivers out there who also need assistance. Like you mentioned, there's almost, 300,000 almost caregivers just in Virginia. And what I love about EDF is that they are providing a platform for caregivers to share their stories and to reach those unseen caregivers that we don't know about yet, and to reach the people in organizations like VS that are in positions and that are capable and willing to help bring positive changes back into the lives of the caregivers, the veterans, and their families. So the goal of this initiative that we're trying to do here, the Virginia Caregiver Coalition, really aligns with my personal motivations for advocating for caregivers. I want to help caregivers reach the level of support and the access those vital resources that they need as early as possible in their caregiving journeys, no matter where they live in the state or in the nation or in the world, really. This is going to help them not only be successful in their caregiving roles, but also it's going to help them to not lose themselves in the process. So I'm just really excited and proud to be a part of the team that appreciates the value of military caregivers and wants to get them access to the supports, tools, and resources that they really need. And so I feel like what we're trying to do here is really just a powerful start for the forward momentum and the positive change that we want to and need to see in Virginia caregivers. We want them to not just be surviving in their communities, we want them to thrive. So I think it's good stuff. But that is me, and I'm going to pass you back over to the lovely Miss Betsy Eves.
Thank you, Deb. I really love what you talked about there. Your own personal journey as a caregiver, when you identified as a caregiver, and, kind of some of the struggles you've gone through, but also some of the things that you've learned. I think your story and what you've been through and what you've learned is what's going to help the next generation of caregivers. So thank you so much for sharing. My name is Betsy Eves. I have been in Virginia since 2016. And I am caregiver to my husband. We have been together for 15 years, and we met, way back in Washington State, like a lot of military love stories start. And we fell in love quick, and we fell in love fast, and then he deployed. 3 deployments and a move to Germany. And I was living this fantastic, wonderful life of being a military spouse. I was in bliss, right? And then I wasn't. And that's kind of how caregiving kind of happens, I think, for a lot of us, is that, it just is there. Some people, they get a phone call. Other people, it happens like me. It happens over time. 3 deployments really took a whole toll on my husband. He was in 17 close range IED explosions. He witnessed his friends perish in a way that nobody should have to watch. And he wasn't properly screened for brain injuries during his first 2 deployments. So after that 3rd deployment and his PCS to Germany, things kind of fell apart for us. And that's because he has suffered greatly from the invisible wounds of war. As of today, my husband has been hospitalized 5 times for attempted suicide because of the things he witnessed in war and the undiagnosed TBIs and all of those things that kind of compound when you're back to back deploying. It just kind of all came out of the woodwork after his 3rd deployment. And since then, he's tried to harm himself 5 times. And as his wife, after the first time, I didn't call myself a caregiver then. I did what any wife would do, which is to handle it all and pick up all the pieces and make sure the kids were taken care of and the bills were still paid. And every time he was hospitalized, I just went into survival mode and just took care of it all. Like, I didn't really have a choice. But for me, caregiving comes in these waves. And over these past 5 hospitalizations, it's like these peaks and valleys, these really wonderful, great times of our military experience. And then we've got these really, really low times. And, to be honest, right now we're coming out of a low time and we're figuring out the next steps. But for me, as an individual, the first suicide attempt was that he had, I actually witnessed all 5, but the first time was really hard as an individual, as a spouse, to watch your strong service member fall apart like that, and you're the only one there to help them. And it's a big burden that was put on my shoulders, and I didn't realize what that burden was going to feel like that first time it happened. But 8 years later and 5 hospitalizations, I'm carrying a lot of weight on my shoulders as the person who is here to care for him the most. The cost of war has taken a toll on him, but it's also taken a toll on me. When we were in Germany, they were starting to withdraw the forces in Germany. And so that also meant the healthcare services were also withdrawn. And so after that first suicide attempt, he had another one, and then a hospitalization because he was over medicated by his doctor who was trying to fix him. The Army decided that it was time for him to get out. And so we came to Virginia. And it was here in Virginia that I heard the term caregiver for the first time. I was at Fort Belvoir and I was at an event for, new people to the base. And I met another woman who happened to be a caregiver and a Dole Foundation fellow. And she shared her journey of struggles of dealing with her husband, who also had PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. And a lot of things she was talking about sounded very familiar to me. Up until that moment, I thought I was just doing what I was supposed to do as his wife. I didn't know it had a name, let alone a whole community of resources to support us. But she's like, yeah, I'm a caregiver and we've got a caregiver group that meets here once a month. And let me introduce you to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and all these other great organizations across the state. And that's when I realized I was, okay, this has a name. I'm not alone. There's other people around here. Ironically enough, I met Deb at one of those events, and her and I have been close ever since. And that event led me to the Dole Foundation, which is how I met Pat, who will be speaking next. And, it was ingrained in me early on in Virginia that relationships are going to help me get through being a caregiver to my veteran. And the relationships that I have formed with other caregivers have been my saving grace. I have 2 children, a daughter, she's 22, and a son who's 10. My oldest has moved out, and she has de facto become a caregiver for my husband as well. And so I'm also thinking about how can I support my children who are also de facto caregivers through all of this. And that's always weighing on me as a caregiver as well. I have been thinking a lot about what I wanted to share about what I've learned over these past 8 years, specifically since 2016, being here in Virginia, about what it feels like to be a caregiver here in Virginia and what I've learned about being here. And there's 2 things that stand out to me. One, caregiving is going to be a lifelong journey. And I think for most caregivers, this is going to be true because they're veterans. Injuries, illnesses, whatever ailments they have, they're not going to end tomorrow or next week after the next doctor's appointments. They're really going to be struggling or dealing with or maintaining their healthcare for their entire life. And I didn't really think about that. But digging into this community here and building those relationships, I realized that it's going to be a long-term process. And so I have to start thinking differently about how do I live my life, knowing that this is kind of going to be a new normal for me. The other thing that I learned is that there are resources out here, but currently it's really difficult to access the resources or to know where to even begin to look for resources. I feel very fortunate that I was introduced to the Dole Foundation immediately upon arriving to Virginia. But I can't say that that's true for every other caregiver across the state. See, I lived in Northern Virginia at the time, and now I live in Central, rural Virginia. And I've been down here since the summer, and I'm seeing, there's work to be done down here. So the resources are there. And so my goal and my personal passion with continuing to help caregivers, like I have been these last 6 years, is so that I can beg the big city resources and I can help create those bridges and pipelines to get those resources to other caregivers in more rural parts of the state. And that's for me what is motivating me to continue this work that I'm doing, and why I'm so excited for this collaboration with the Virginia Department of Veterans Services. I think it's going to be fantastic. And I know Deb alluded to the coalition a minute ago, but after Pat speaks, we will we'll really go into details about kind of what we hope for the future for Virginia caregivers and how our two organizations are working together. So, you know, I'm really so thankful for this opportunity to share just a little bit of my story, a little bit of what I've learned. And if we ever get the chat box back up and running, you know, please drop your information in there. And I want you to know that if you're hearing something that resonates with us, chat's not working, drop me an instant message in there. You know, Deb, any one of us, we're not just here to talk at you. We were really hoping to have a conversation with you. So please, you know, reach out to us with any questions. And I'm excited to announce Pat as our next speaker. So thank you so much, everybody. Pat.
Say I'm on the now as I speak. Good everyone. I'm glad to be here. As Betsy said, my name is Patricia Ochan. I became a caregiver. Well, first I am a spouse of a Marine. We've been married for 15 years now. And I became a caregiver in 2014. And I learned that I was a caregiver actually when I was called out of my job, received a phone call, called my job, and found myself around this kind of test. And my husband was given
Hey,
sustained injuries while in combat. Yes.
Hey, Pat, you're breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me? That back.
It's breaking up a
Okay.
little bit.
Okay, so
You want to go ahead and try again, see if
okay,
we can hear
let me
you?
see how to do this. Okay, let me define the packet. In 2 minutes, I'll be packed. Can you hear me? Let me see if I remove it.
All right.
So I want to tell you guys all that Pat is actually on her way to a VA appointment right now. So this is the life of a caregiver. We are multitaskers. We are get it all done all the time. And Pat is an extremely good example of somebody who thrives in this situation. So thank you so much for bearing with Pat as she gets to a spot where she's got some better service. But if anybody else is out there and as a caregiver, you understand working around those VA appointments and getting what you need to get done, even if you have to drive there. So.
Yeah, and I think while we wait for Pat to find a better location, I did see that we had a question dropped into the Q&A. The chat still unfortunately is not working, but if you can go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A. So maybe this would be a good time to answer one of those questions. I'll go ahead and read it out loud, and then Kayla, Betsy, Deb, Marcus, if you want to go ahead and chime in while we wait for Pat. The question is, first off, thanks so much for this incredibly informative presentation. I'm curious, what is the best way for caregivers in Virginia to get connected with DVS and the Dole Foundation? Kayla, would you like to start that?
Yep. So for the Department of Veterans Services, feel free to go to our website. In the top right corner, there's this little box that says appointment line, and you can either select military spouse support and it'll go to me, or you can select the Virginia Veterans and Family Support VVFS, and that will go to Marcus and all of his colleagues to get some other resources. But either route is fine, or you can even email me at milspouse@dvs.virginia.gov, which will also be at the end of our presentation today.
Okay, is this better now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you
I
much
think we're
better.
back, Pat.
Okay, so I found the parking. So anyway, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Pat Ochan, a spouse of a Marine who served for 12 years and got deployed thrice. And unfortunately for me, I was actually a thriving caregiver, military spouse, like Betsy said. I had a job, I was excited, I'd got my master's in law, and life seemed to be okay. You know, my husband deployed, and I just sort of found a way of, you know, moving forward with life. So I got to know I was a caregiver when I found myself sitting at a table panel with doctors. I had received a phone call earlier that day while I was at work and had to drive very fast to the hospital, and found myself on a round table with a diagnosis put in my face. And I remember the doctor saying, Pat, this is going to be for a long term. So we called you because we wanted to prepare you and also to hear from you if you have any concerns, and also to let you know that if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us, you know? And I really was in denial. And the reason I was in denial is because, you know, being an immigrant who grew up in a different culture, mental health is very, very, such a stigma. So I didn't know how I was going to deal with this. I really was confused. But then we went ahead and began the endless doctor appointments, Bethesda, Fort Belvoir, VA, you name it. And along the way, I met caregivers in the corridors of the hospitals. And, you know, we started having conversations. We were all stranded in Virginia. We just didn't know where to go. We didn't know where to get things. So we decided to form a group. And we started as 5 of us, just started to form a group and started going to command in Fort Belvoir and asking, you know, for resources, asking for a way to be included in, you know, the veterans activities and things like that. So later on, I discovered the Elizabeth Dole group. We discovered it as, you know, a group. And I'm very excited because that really EDF gave me such a platform, you know, first of all, to damp the shame, you know, to not feel ashamed about mental health, and to realize that my husband's service was really very important, something very important, very dear to my heart, because, you know, it's service, it's, you know, taking care of other people, it's courageous, you know. And to me, you know, the moment I learned, okay, there's nothing to be ashamed of, I started getting confident, you know, and feeling, you know, more valuable to this community. You know, so then the advocacy began, and, you know, that's where I met so many other caregivers, you know, with the EDF team. And so I'm happy that Virginia is taking this along and, you know, recognizing that you have caregivers amongst, you know, us in the state, and pulling out resources and wanting to share this with everyone. But what I've learned in my 15 years of marriage and with the whole caregiver journey is there are a lot of people still left behind, you know, and it really pains me because, you know, I look at myself and I'm so thankful I even knew English, you know, when I came to this country. I've met so many caregivers who are from countries like Japan, the Philippines, and India, South Africa, you know, who are still afraid to come out. And some of them, I realize it's actually language barrier. Many of them are so young, you know, that they're just so afraid. You know, there's a cultural shock thing also going on with mental health. You know, so I hope that Virginia can actually become a pioneer state in being all inclusive, you know. Think about those spouses who are not coming out. And the reason they're not coming out is they don't even know where to start from. And I appreciate EDF for, you know, coming out and championing this, but we need to speak up more. We need to also speak for the kids, because, you know, if the spouses, the caregivers are struggling, what is happening with the children? You know, if the spouse doesn't come out, then the children don't come out. And so that family is left struggling. So this is really my passion. And I'm so glad, you know, I have the voice, I can lend a voice to this specific category. And I kindly ask that we don't bunch all caregivers in one bunch. I kindly ask that you look at the different caregivers, because that's the only way we can reach everyone. I know amongst the 230, there are definitely so many immigrants, young ones that I meet every day, and one person speaking out to them is not enough. We need the powerhouse of Virginia to come up and, stand behind us, stand behind EDF. We need to just keep on speaking about this. After all, Virginia is proud to say 1 in 4 Virginians is a veteran, So how about add 1 in 4, Virginians is a caregiver or is a, military spouse? How about we start saying things like that, to make everybody feel proud about this service. So I hope that this helps, and I appreciate you bearing with me, as I move to a doctor's appointment. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Pat, for sharing. And I thank you, everybody, for your patience as she, navigated her caregiving duties while she shared her story with us today. So thank you so much, Pat and Deb, again. And I really wanted to circle back around to how important partnerships are and to talk a little bit about what EDF and the Virginia Department of Veteran Services is doing together. So, as Laurel announced early on, that the governor of Virginia has announced this month Hidden Heroes Month. And what that means for the state of Virginia and for the Dole Foundation and for the Virginia Veteran Services Office is that this is just a start for us. This is a start for identifying the caregivers that are in our state. This is a start for collaborating amongst agencies to not reinvent the wheel, but to make sure that we are all using the right language, the right tools to help and identify caregivers across the state of Virginia, and that we're actually working together to help them. As a caregiver in Virginia for the last 6 years, along with Deb and Pat, we have gone through our own experiences here and we see where these gaps are. And so it's been really interesting working with Kayla and her team to hear from her side where the gaps are. And so our goal here with Hidden Heroes Month in the state of Virginia is to bring our 2 organizations to create a caregiver coalition in the state of Virginia. And this coalition is to bring agencies, nonprofits, government organizations, businesses, any community stakeholders in the state of Virginia together to create bridges of communication amongst one another. Okay. And once our agencies in Virginia start talking to each other and sharing what their gaps and resources that they're finding with the other agencies, they can start sharing resources as well. So we want to build those networks and communications across the state of Virginia, but with caregivers in mind. These are going to be caregiver resources. There are a lot of bridges already built for the veteran, but here in Virginia, we're lacking in the caregiver support. So that's what we want our coalition to do. So if you are an organization, a community stakeholder, and you'd like to join us together in this coalition, please reach out to Laurel. Her contact information will be on the next slide. The other thing that we want to accomplish, though, is not just bridges, but we want pipelines. We want to get that information flowing to the caregivers that are all across the state of Virginia. But we can't do that in silos working independently. So that's why our 2 organizations are coming together to start, so that, again, those bridges will be built, and now we're going to lay those pipelines out to all the caregivers and figure out what's the best way to get the resources there. In addition to that, and I know Marcus talked about this earlier, his office is already doing it, but we want to figure out collectively as a coalition what those gaps and resources are. And where can we fill those gaps? Now that we know what everybody does across the state to support caregivers, how can we identify and then fill those gaps? Okay. And so we're going to be doing more things like what Marcus is doing with the work groups and the assessments, but we're going to be doing that across our partners and across the state. And what's great about the Virginia Department of Veteran Services is that they got 34 offices across the whole state. They've got people everywhere, right? So we've got a great baseline of support out in the community. Now we need to find all the supplemental community stakeholders to join us, okay? We're going to identify those obstacles. With this coalition, we're also going to build and strengthen communities. Obviously, we're starting at the statewide level. We got to start somewhere, right? So we're going to collectively build our community as a state first. And as this initiative rolls on, because like I said, this is the beginning, right? This is the start. As our initiative rolls along, we're going to bring those resources from the macro level down into the rural levels. Well, we got to figure out how to do that first. And that's why we're coming together. And then finally, which I'm really excited about, because I think that this is a missing component in what a lot of veteran groups do. I'm not bashing any, but I'm just saying that I've noticed that this is kind of a missing component, is training of the people who are doing the work. Okay, so any coalition member that would want to join this, any community stakeholder that would want to join our coalition, we're going to ask that they train themselves with resources like the Dole Foundation's Campaign for Inclusive Care, to learn how to include caregivers in the work that they're doing at an organic first stop level, like what Deb talked about. So we can't ask for change until we train and educate the people that are at that, you know, boots on the ground level, actually out in those communities, helping our caregivers. So we have been a part of some really great organizations that have made some really great tools and are continuing to make great tools. EDF is just one of them, but I know that you know, the Virginia Department of Veteran Services, you guys have gone through your own trainings and are working on some stuff there. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's getting started. We want to continue that training and education with this coalition. So, you know, we have some lofty ideas and some big goals, but you know, if one thing that caregiving has taught me as an individual is that it is a journey. It's a marathon. It's going to be a lifelong process. And, you know, you're meeting 3 of us Dole Fellows in Virginia here, but there's about a dozen of us in Virginia. And, you know, we listen to the caregivers in our communities, and we know that we can do more to help. And I think that coming together with caregivers as leads is a first step of really helping the agencies and organizations that we're working with to understand what truly our needs are and where we see the gaps and how it's, I really don't know of any other organization that's letting caregivers lead initiatives like this to make change. And I think that's why this is so unique, and why Kayla and Marcus are so great, because they've joined us caregivers, you know, they've joined us caregivers on this initiative. And so we are so excited for this opportunity. If we could slip to the next slide real quick, we're almost done. Thank you. So these are the 2 asks that we have for you today. If you're a caregiver on this call, we want you to join our community here in Virginia. And I've left the direct links to where you can join the Hidden Heroes community with Elizabeth Dole Foundation. And I've also left a link here to the map. We've got a great map on our Hidden Heroes website, where you can see resources from across the state of Virginia, as well as you can see all the other caregivers that have registered in the state. As Laurel mentioned earlier, there's 260 plus 300,000 Virginia caregivers. We want to see them reflected in the numbers in our Virginia state map. So please encourage your other caregivers to join us on this journey. And, you know, we're really doing this so that we can get the resources that you need in your hands, caregivers. That's why we're doing this, because we didn't have everything we needed. Pat, Deb, and I, we didn't have it. So we're working to make sure that the next generation does. And then finally, the next ask is community stakeholders, all of our partners that are in the room. Thank you so much for joining this. And we really would love to have you on board for this coalition. Please reach out to Laurel. Her email address is listed on the slide. Connect with Kayla or Marcus and let us know how you want to be involved, and you know, we'll take the next step. We'll have a conversation. Finally, please look forward to November. November in the state of Virginia will be the next big kind of step in this initiative. We're hoping to have some more to share with you on that, but please keep your eyes out and know that coming in November, we've got some follow-up to this Hidden Heroes Month and this big coalition that we're doing. With that being said, Laurel, I'm going to pass it off to you for any other questions that might be out there and to close us out. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Betsy, and thanks, Pat and Deb, too, for all of you sharing your stories and really leading in this vision for how Virginia can be more inclusive to the caregiver population. We do have a few questions in the Q&A. Again, we apologize if the chat box is not working, but please, if you have a question, feel free to drop it into the Q&A. And I know that this question has been answered in the chat, but maybe if we can discuss it on the call. It's what is the best way, or what is the best thing a neighbor or community member can do to support caregivers like you? Maybe Betsy, Deb, or Pat, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So for me, when I don't have neighbors anymore, unfortunately, because we moved to the country, remember, Central Virginia now. But I just came from Northern Virginia, where we were, lived next door to next door. And I found that the other military members that were in my community that knew that we were military, when they reached out to me, that just to say hello, not to offer anything or really do anything, but just to connect with me, that made me feel like I was no longer alone in my neighborhood. So, after living there for several years, I kind of identified who the other military veterans were in my community. So it was really helpful for them when they would self-identify to me. They actually ended up being people that I could go to in a time of emergency, because I don't have to explain myself to another veteran family. So I would encourage people to just let themselves be known that they are an ally for, other military members in their family. And you don't have to go into details about anything, but just to let people know that you're there as somebody who can do whatever they need, So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks.
Okay, just to add, I also wanted to say that if you can, and you know anyone in your community whose husband or wife is deployed, please reach out to them, because a lot of families go through a lot of stress while their loved ones are deployed, and they just don't know what to expect. They are very stressed out. They are worried for the safety of the loved ones. So I think it starts from there. If you reach out, you'll probably find a mom or dad with the kids, and just starting a relationship with them during the holidays, maybe paying them a visit, because many of them, again, like I said, maybe immigrants and families are overseas. So basically they are alone with no one else, to rely on, but maybe their children. So reaching out is very important, and just to show them they appreciate it, have a conversation with them. And if you can, if there's any chore to be done in the house, that would be helpful. A meal to share with them would be helpful. A gift card, whatever you can do is really appreciated.
And just to piggyback on that real quick, is that caregivers are used to doing everything themselves, like absolutely everything. So if you happen to reach out to us or to any of the caregivers, just know that we appreciate just the thought. You might have to be persistent. You might have to develop a little bit of back and forth before we accept the help, because we're just not used to it. And but anytime anyone reaches out and offers anything, a muffin, a chat, and anything is really appreciated, and we know that you care. But I would say persistence, just because we're used to doing the isolating thing. So
Wonderful. Thank you, Pat, Deb, and Betsy. We have a couple more questions in the chat that we'll try to get to. Next up, and I know, Pat, you spoke about this during you sharing your story, but what is EDF doing to help caregiver kids? Would one of the fellows or Pat like to take that question on? Oh, Pat, I think
Pat, you're on mute.
Sorry. One of the things I like about EDF is they have come up with Wounded Warrior Project to form a coalition called Hidden Helpers, which is really great, because kids like my son, who have been isolated, sometimes teachers don't even understand these children. And unfortunately for them, they've been forced to grow up very fast, and they have actually become hidden helpers in the home. You know, most of our kids are helping their dads or their moms, you know, with chores in the house, or maybe going with, like my son does, go to doctor appointments with his dad during the summer, you know. So Elizabeth Dole Foundation have created the hidden helpers, and they're now trying to get resources for these children, which is great, you know. So I think the children are now going to find out that there are other children just like them. And come to find out, Elizabeth Dole Foundation recently did a study and found out that there are 2.3 million children in caregiving households. So we have these hidden helpers that nobody talks about, you know, just helping their families and thinking this is normal. They're isolated from all the other children, not having normal summers because they have to help mom or dad at home, you know. So this is a great thing, because I see it the same way it happened for us as caregivers. Through EDF, we got recognized, and finally our voice is getting heard. So I'm hopeful that the children are also going to benefit from this. Best thing about this coalition is the connections it's bringing these children. The fact that they know there are 2.3 million just like them. They may meet these other children, they will hear their stories, they'll share stories. So it's going to give our children confidence, you know, give them back their confidence that, you know, it's not so bad. Caregiving is not so bad, you know. And I always tell my son, you know, I remember as a child, my mom used to send me and my siblings to go and help my grandma. Now, my grandma was not disabled or anything, but she was elderly and she needed help. And my mom used to send us to do, you know, chores for her and stuff like that. And I tell my son that, you know, that really helped me be patient now with dad, you know, and manage the family. So look at it in a positive way. So this is one good thing that I'm very positive about with EDF.
Just to add to what Pat said, the Hidden Heroes Coalition that EDF has dozens and dozens of organizations a part of it that are, they're essentially, they've already set up what we're trying to do here, but for kids on a national level. And so, you know, the initiative, the Hidden Helpers Initiative, has recently begun in the last couple of years. But we are seeing that pipeline and those bridges that I were talking about starting to do their thing now within that Hidden Helpers community. So, you know, needless to say, there's still a lot of work to do, but the foundation and the coalition for Hidden Helpers and Hidden Heroes, the Hidden Helpers of the Hidden Heroes, you know, it's starting to work. And so be patient, but it's, you know, you can go to the Hidden Heroes website and find out more about the Hidden Helpers Coalition too, if you need more information.
Yeah, and a link to the Hidden Helpers work was just dropped into the chat. So please do explore that work and those resources for our caregiving kids. I see we also have another question in the chat. I think Betsy, this one might be a great one for you to answer, as well as Deb and Pat. What do fellows actually do? Are you navigators? What is an Elizabeth Dole Fellow?
Great question. So Elizabeth Dole Fellows are caregivers first. And to become an Elizabeth Dole Fellow, we actually had to apply. So those that apply are typically leaders within their communities who have the bandwidth and space to advocate for other communities or who have a passion for helping other caregivers. I applied in 2016 and was selected for 2017. And so for me, I decided that I didn't really know how I wanted to advocate for other caregivers. So I spent the first couple of years really just kind of using my story and my voice to share the journey of a caregiver and to share one perspective to start bringing the light and shining the light on the gaps and resources and the issues that we really have. So a fellow is encouraged to do whatever they're comfortable with to help advocate for the rights and resources and the expanded care for caregivers. We are leaders within our own states and communities, and we try to listen to and speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. So no, we're not navigators. We're caregivers who want to make it better for other people and have the support of the Dole Foundation to do that. And we also, you know, get to work with amazing partners like Kayla and Marcus. And we would not get that opportunity otherwise. So this is not a paid position for us. We do it because it's our passion, and we do it because we don't want the next caregiver to have it as hard as we did.
Deb and Pat, would you add anything to that?
I think that was pretty well said. You summed that up beautifully.
Yeah, Betsy said it all. Betsy said it all.
Wonderful. And our Dole Caregiver Fellows really are the heart and soul of the foundation. And as you can see from just this call, we have incredible caregivers who are passionate about moving this work forward and want to be involved in their community. So we are going to drop the fellows link into the chat as well if you are interested in learning more about the Dole Caregiver Fellowship opportunity. And we are right at time. So with that, I think we're going to close up. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We're so thankful to the Virginia Department of Veterans Services, our Caregiver Fellows, and to each of you for your work to better connect and support caregivers across Virginia. Please do keep an eye out for a follow-up email that will have a link to the recording, a link to all the resources that were mentioned. And we hope that you will join us in this effort to advance this important work. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.